Hello and welcome to another episode of Teaching Heroes, a teaching podcast where I ask teachers and educators, what does it take to turn up every day to teach tomorrow's leaders? And today I have a most special guest, my favorite Californian, maybe even my favorite American, Dr. Kristen Willeumier. Thank you for coming onto the podcast.
Yay, Dr. Joe, thank you so much. I'm your favorite American. I'm so excited.
Maybe Mickey Mouse. I have to just think about. I'm a bit of a Disney nut, so.
Mickey's pretty cool. I was actually Minnie Mouse for Halloween one year, so
oh, really?
Very young, but yes. So I appreciate that.
That's great.
Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you, and it's great to have you back. Oh, well, we were just saying you haven't come on to Teaching Heroes before, but I have interviewed Dr. K for another podcast on chewing the fat, so you can find that on YouTube, where we were mainly talking about brain and health and how healthy eating can help your brain function. And so that was a great interview, and I suggest you go and watch that. And we will talk a bit about that in this podcast. But once we stopped recording, Dr. K and I had just the best conversation around teaching and intelligence and drama teaching in the brain. And I said, can you please come on my podcast, please, to talk a bit more about that? Because, yeah, it was such a fascinating conversation. So thank you for coming on to Teaching Heroes.
Well, first of all, it is an honor and a pleasure, and I honor you as a teaching hero and the incredible, inspirational people that you have had on your podcast that are doing such great work in the world. We need teachers. You are the ones who are helping sort of develop the minds of our next generation. And what you do is so crucial, especially, in these times, right? Where and I actually want to ask you a few questions too.
Okay.
All right. Because you are somebody that is currently in the educational system, and I've got some curiosity questions on brain and mental health and what's going on in the educational system. So anyways, it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, great. Oh, that's so, and Kristen told me that she was watching the podcast, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. So
I love this podcast. Really everybody needs to watch this. It's really great content.
Yeah. Just had amazing guests, and appreciate you coming on, because I think, throughout the last couple of weeks, there's been lots of things touched on, and I think today will bring a lot of, we'll talk a bit about COVID, I think, and I'd love to talk about that with you as well. And yes. And also, what I really want to talk about.
I was thinking about kids and mental health and how teachers today are impacted by that. Because 20 years ago, I was a teacher. I used to help teach classes in university and graduate school. But mental health wasn't a part of the curriculum. It wasn't a part of the conversation. And I think for teachers today, it has to be. So, again, that's something I can ask you about, but well, you're interviewing me.
Why don't we start there? But then I need you to introduce yourself to my guests first, though. So, Dr. Kristen,
okay, I will do so. And you know what? I'm going to do it in the context of teaching, because people who are listening are probably teachers. So I grew up in the Midwest. My mother was a teacher. She was an art history teacher and a math teacher, and education was highly coveted in our household growing up. I had to do Montessori school so that starts at like 1.5 years of age. And my mom wanted me to have the best opportunities possible. And what's so interesting, and it's very similar to your background, I really excelled in the sciences. She was an artist. So while I was at school taking all those kind of classes, she had me do theater, and she had me go to the Art Institute, and was really working on developing me as a well-rounded, human being. But my background, so I'm a neuroscientist. I've been in the field for 20 years. So back in 1998, I went to graduate school at UCLA. I got a master's degree in the Department of Physiological Science, and that is where I was teaching, helping to teach undergraduates in physiological science. And in that capacity, these were students who really wanted to get into medical school. So talking about pressures in teaching, all of these kids wanted to get A's. They did not get A's in the classes that I was helping to be the TA for. Their chances of getting into medical school were significantly impacted. And I know you've spoken to teachers on these podcasts about, students' expectations and parent expectations. And so there were some really interesting teachable moments and stressful moments when, sometimes you can't give somebody the grade that they need to matriculate into the next level of their career. But so I was a TA, physiological science. I then continued on graduate school at UCLA. I did a master's and a PhD in the Department of Neurobiology. And I studied a gene that becomes mutated in the young onset form of Parkinson's disease. Worked in a laboratory setting, worked in rats and animal models, literally studying how neurons communicate with one another, and particular neurons that had the either downregulation of the gene. We want to see how changes in the way the two neurons communicated with one another. So again, I studied things at the level of the single cell. I did graduate and postgraduate work over at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in the Department of Neurology. When I finished that training, I then went on to work in a clinical setting. So I worked for the Amen Clinic, which is a very large outpatient psychiatric center that focuses on treating people with complex psychiatric disorders. And we would use neuroimaging as a way to target and treat those issues. We would do natural things first, so dietary and lifestyle modification, nutraceuticals, use of medications when necessary, and then we had advanced technologies, neurofeedback, transcranial magnetic stimulation, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So we had a wealth of tools available to help treat these disorders. While working in the clinical setting, I was also teaching. I was running the research department, so I had 20 people in my department at any one time, so I was overseeing students there. But in the clinical setting, I would teach brain health courses to, we had run a very large study in professional athletes, which you and I have talked about, and the trauma that can occur from playing collision-based sports. So one of the things I had to do was teach these athletes brain health principles. I was so successful, I continued teaching in the clinical setting to our psychiatric patients. And so I was teaching brain health principles to teens and people into their 90s, which is really fun as an educator. How do you make brain health fun and engaging? And while in a clinical setting, it's really important to people because their mental health depends on it. So it was a part of their sort of treatment protocol. I was also very fortunate to have people who were just excited and wanted to learn more. Left the clinical setting, wrote a book, as you know, and now I've been, I guess, teaching on a greater level. I do a lot of professional speaking, in front of doctors and medical professionals and the public through media and podcasts. So my teaching has changed over the years. And that brings me to where we are today.
Yes, and that's how we got connected, was your work in brain and nutrition. Dr. K is a special clinical advisor for Simpler Health, and I did the Simpler Health program last year. And we've had Dean Kilby on the podcast earlier talking about health and education, and so Dr. K is a clinical advisor for Simpler Health, and so I interviewed Dr. K for their podcast. And let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that was one of, even at 42, that was a really huge eye-opening thing for me to think about how much what I was eating every day was impacting my brain health, and not just in the moment, but the more, and I've got your book here. And I really recommend everyone read it. It's very, I'm not a science background, but I could comprehend a lot of the things you're saying, because it's just that, really top tips on your nutrition in the brain. But what I found fascinating was I wasn't making decisions just for myself in the present, but actually in the future. So switching to a healthy diet meant that I was really setting myself up as best I could for a long life, cognitively.
Right. It's for your brain health and longevity. People don't understand that, as we age, our brain changes. We get to go into our 40s with very sort of healthy brain function, but as we, age from 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, brain volume begins to shrink. And I talked to you about that. It can shrink up to 5% per decade, and that accelerates after the age of 70. Most people are aware neurodegenerative diseases start to happen in the population around your mid-sixth decade of life, so 65 and on. And with each decade, the cognitive decline begins to accelerate, so that by the time you reach 85, if you are lucky enough to reach 85, you have a 30% chance and up to a 50% chance of having dementia. So because the cellular processes that lead to cognitive decline start to change 2 decades before you have a symptom, that means you need to start taking care of your brain health in your 40s. I would not have known that if I was not in this field. I guarantee you, just like you said, you were not aware of it. It's not like this is being taught to you in schools. This is something that a neurologist would know, a neuroscientist would know, because this is what we study. I used to think about fitness and health more like most people from a vanity perspective. You want to be thin, you want to look good. And if you could get away with eating foods, I remember in college, we called this the cheerleader diet. It's like people would just drink Diet Cokes, and you might have a Pop-Tart. So it would be calorie restriction. So nobody really thought about the quality of the foods going in. You think about to be lean meant less calories. You didn't think about if those calories were Pop-Tarts or, like you said, Diet Cokes, or you having to smoke cigarettes, which is what people would do. All of those being detrimental to your brain health. When we think about Alzheimer's, there's 7 modifiable risk factors, those being midlife obesity, type 2 diabetes, midlife hypertension, cognitive inactivity, which is why we need lifelong learning and education, physical inactivity, depression, and social isolation. So all of those, you kind of have to look at all of those together and say collectively, how do I make sure I'm at a healthy weight? I don't have diabetes, right? I don't have hypertension. I'm not smoking. I'm keeping my mind engaged. I'm staying physically active. I'm staying socially connected. This is really fascinating. The pandemic has really shown what social isolation is. Most people don't even think about it. Social isolation, we think about it when you're 65, 70, but now we've experienced it collectively on a global scale. And I feel maybe that's even one of the silver linings of the pandemic. As we're out of it now, the vaccines are available, we have drugs available to treat COVID. People are going to be more mindful about the importance of even a social connection for your brain health.
Come back to that. I had like 50 questions out of everything you just said.
I could probably just keep talking for an hour straight, but it's almost like the 2 big teaching moments I love people is, after the age of 40, just the process of brain aging happens. And we can still be cognitively sharp as a centenarian or a super centenarian. And this is where the educational piece really comes into play, because lifelong learning is a part of it. Even if your brain volume shrinks, we have something called synaptic plasticity and neuroplasticity, which is basically neurons are able to continue to make connections with their neighbors. And that happens because you're continuing to learn. That's why the educational piece is so important. And I know we talked about this on the other podcast. One of the who I admire so much is Betty White, the actress, who just turned 99, and she thanked her agent for continuing to give her scripts. So she's forced to continue to, I shouldn't even say force, I'm going to be mindful of my word choices as I she enjoys the process of memorization. That is keeping her brain sharp. So, and you see in university, back when I was at UCLA, we had emeritus professors who were in their 90s coming to my Synaptic Journal Club, learning from me.
Wow.
A graduate student, offering their wisdom to me. And it was such an honor for me to see, and it's like, I'm going to cry. It like tears me up. I was so honored as this young 20-something graduate student to be teaching them about something new that I'm learning in the lab, but they're engaged and excited to learn and offer me suggestions on things I could do. And so that's the beauty of education, and that's the beauty of lifelong learning. So for the people who are listening, who are educators, who are really inspiring generations of kids to go on and get graduate degrees and postgraduate degrees and to keep learning and teaching, I feel it's just an asset, a treasure. The educational process is a treasure to your brain health and longevity.
Yes. And yes, so many again. So let me ask this question.
Okay, I'll let you ask. Sure.
Oh, it's so great. But what I wanted to go back to was that cheerleader diet you were talking about. And while we don't have that many cheerleaders here in Australia, but in terms of at school, there's not that many.
I use it like as a,
I get it. Yeah. Because I was thinking of, teenagers that I've taught, because I was a high school drama English teacher, like similar diet, and I thought for the first time, it kind of struck me why they weren't engaging in class was that if their brain, you can sometimes as a teacher make those assumptions about, that's just their attitude, and they just have a bad attitude to learning. But when you said that, it struck me like, oh, wow, it's just probably that their brains weren't, that their brains weren't able to be engaged because of their poor diet.
Well, that's where, a lot rests on what's happening in the home. Are teaching, what are you giving your kids as they walk out the door? And that training starts at a young, like with your kids. Because once they get into college, I mean, every bad habit, just happens. You don't. I will tell you, in college, we never slept. I stay up all night and then go to class, and we take naps in the middle of the day. I look at the things I did on my 20s. In fact, the book that you were holding, I think I shared with you, the title was initially A User's Guide to Great Brain Health, Everything I Wish I Knew in My 20s.
Oh, really? Yeah.
That was the initial title. And my publisher was like, no. This is going out to a much larger audience.
Yeah.
Truth in that, because we have so many habits, and it's okay. Like, I mean, we've come a long way, and I think people are much more conscious about their foods and food choices. We talk about eating GMO-free foods, eating organic, the importance of fruits and vegetables. Back in the day, when I was in college, I worked at a fitness center. I was around bodybuilders. I was an athlete myself. I was a competitive equestrian, and I was a model. So being lean and thin and healthy was on the brain. And we did it, again, we had the Metrec shakes. We had all of those things available. But now I just feel that people are much more conscientious about the food they're eating. Now, to your point, teaching kids in classes, it's unfortunate. Teachers are at a little bit of a disadvantage because you know that the kids are well hydrated and the kids are fed a breakfast that has some protein in it that helps boost the dopamine, which will help them with focus. I know you had an episode with a gentleman who was teaching, and he was talking about the novel classroom environments and putting the sticky notes on the wall and trying to make learning fun for the kids. And then he said, he came back and asked them what they remembered, and they didn't really remember anything. There was a lot of fun doing his new style of training, but they didn't remember. And the recall piece, number one, the fastest way to get people to remember things is repetition. So if anybody's listening and they're teachers, the more you repeat things to your students, the more they will remember. And number two, that creativity and the novelty also helps them remember. So I did like his approach. The foods they eat are really important. And if I was teaching a class today, it'd be interesting if I would be able to have access to, here, like if you go into my classroom, here, fresh water that you can have, or some vegetables. I mean, you almost want to have that available to offer if somebody's walking in a classroom. Here's an apple. Please go ahead and have that while I'm teaching you.
Yes.
It's actually going to fuel your brain, give you some hydration, because nobody talked about brain fog when I went to school. But brain fog is a real thing. If you're not well hydrated and you're not putting clean fuel in your brain, you can't be expected to learn and retain information.
Yeah, we have in primary schools here, we have a munch and crunch morning. So at about 10 o'clock, students can bring out water and, either a vegetable or a fruit to have in that moment. It just struck me. I was like, wow, I don't think we really do that in high schools, but that would actually be quite important. And as you say, if they don't bring them, that could be something that is just provided, so a tray of fruit, and I think there's something in, even if they don't eat them the first couple of times, that the continued availability of it, it's the part of that repetition is that just to keep having it available, so that they recognize how important it is to just have something healthy to keep the brain going.
It's like you as a teacher have this unique opportunity, beautiful consciousness that you are. Those kids are in your class for minutes, 90 minutes, however long, and you have this ability to inspire them. So now when people would come and work with me, I'm known for always having a green juice. I would have it before I would teach. People knew this. But just imagine if they came into your classroom and you could always have on the side, there's like a little vegetable platter and fruit and a thing of water, and it was just there and available. Nobody has to take it, but imagine you run in and it's there. And even changing the vending machines. So in the setting that I worked in, I was very fortunate. We had this mantra. We had to live the message. So everything that I teach, I do. And in our clinic, you were not allowed to drink sodas. You weren't allowed to sugary drinks. It was actually a violation. If you wanted to have those things, you had to have them outside of the clinic. We called it a brain health violation. And we changed the vending machines. So everything in the vending machines were nuts, dried fruits, seeds, coconut water. And it really transformed our business thing. And it just, I think inspiring schools to have more of a brain healthy approach. And it's simple things like that. It could just be having availability of these things. Educators are going to be happier because kids will come in, they can grab their water, just sit down, and they'll be able to focus more, because a 1% drop in hydration to the brain can initiate brain fog.
Wow, that's not much.
If somebody's coming into class and they're really feeling like they have brain fog, and I might even say this if I was an educator and say, listen, I know you guys have been running around, it's hot outside, get a little recorder so you can listen to me teach, but maybe you also record it so you can go back and listen again, and take notes. So there's all these fun strategies that you can use in a teaching environment where, you might be coming in and, or there's certain students you're working with that aren't able to pay attention. So you as the teacher can even come up and offer these potential solutions, right?
I love that live the message. And I think, teachers are amazing and incredible, but I do think sometimes we don't always live the message that we're teaching. And it can be so powerful. And I know a friend who's a teacher who did the same weight loss program that I did. she said she used to have a Diet Coke every morning, you know, and that would be on the table, and she was known for having these Diet Cokes. She said the kids noticed within a couple of days that she was no longer having a Diet Coke, you know, that had been replaced with water. So that impact straight away. They would have gone, oh, Miss is being healthy now. She's taken away the Diet Coke. Like, such a powerful message, which the kids remember that. They'll probably, you know, they'll have flashbacks of that as they're older, you know, switching on. Oh, remember when Miss, you know, got healthy, she took away the Diet Coke. Yeah.
Well, I think teachers have a unique opportunity to share empowering health message. You know, we talked about brain health or mental health when I was in school, not through any of my education. And I know I've listened to some of your podcasts. I realize when you're teaching, you come in, you have a lesson plan. It has to be accomplished within a certain amount of time. Yeah. But I also feel, and this is why I love that you're having the podcast, you as an individual who wants to change humanity and really touch and inspire generations, you as an individual are going to show up who you are, how you present yourself. You know, do you come in cheerful and optimistic? Do you take a minute to check in with your class? How's everybody doing today? How's your mental health? You know, come speak with me if you're having issues. You can even share, wow, you know, I found this new green juice that I love, or share like a really fun health tip, or hey, it's Thanksgiving. Has anybody had figs before? Do you know how, you know, figs are brain healthy and neuroprotective? You can even come in and do these 30-second brain health tips. Like, That's
a great idea. And what I love about how you've created it is that it's positive, and it's not a you must do. It's just this is something you could do, or this is something that I do. And so it's just offered in this, you know, positive way, rather than as kind of like a teaching lesson, which I think, you know, sometimes is great to be.
You've talked about this in some of your podcasts. It's about relationships and opening up the lines of communication with people that you're connecting with. And those relationships can last a very long time, right? We all remember our favorite teachers and graduate school mentors. I mean, I look up to them. So you are the role models for children, and we need you to be, you know, present, and we need you to be sharing all of those beautiful teachable moments. Yes, you might be teaching history or macroeconomics or something, you know, that's very specific, but it's so, I think, coming to kids as human beings and wanting to help them grow and develop. And I think there's that brain health piece or the mental health piece that's as important as the content that you're teaching.
And it can be you know, in that way, then if you're a teacher that's kind of new to this kind of brain health, well, you know, as you say, Kristen, it's not really out there very much. So I think it's everyone is pretty new, but you can be on that. Yeah, you can be on that discovery together with your students and talk daily about brain health tips that both of you are discovering. So it's not something, you know, for your students, it's something for yourself as well, and be on that journey together. It could be, you know, really exciting.
Well, you could even start with just a check-in, like, hey, how's everybody doing? You know, we've just pandemic, like, I know people might be struggling because mental health issues are going to show up in the classroom in poor performance. So it's also an opportunity for you to have a student connect with you, and you be able to connect them with psychological services. You know, I just spoke a couple of times, one of my girlfriend's classes over at the UCLA Anderson Business School, and she has me come in and talk to their students about brain health and mental health. And it's a little different from the class she's teaching. But then afterwards, I got this rush of responses from different kids with different issues. And I was able to help just talk to each one of them and get them back on track. I mean, right now with, you know, some kids spent, you know, a year not going to college or a year and a half, and they feel sad and isolated. Yes, we're coming out of the pandemic, but, you know, what I'm seeing students are really struggling with is they're just not happy and they don't understand why. And before the pandemic, they were happy, and it doesn't make sense to them. But that's because they're caught up in this collective fear that we all had. And remember, these are young developing brains. If you're teaching anyone under the age of 25, the brain doesn't reach full maturity until 25, and especially the younger kids. I mean, they're just trying to figure all of this out. So that's why I think I had also wanted to see what's the mental health conversation, and no matter what you're teaching, almost offer that olive branch as, you know, you're somebody that a student can come up and talk to privately. You can help get them the mental health services that they might need. Even now we have telehealth. It's great. I mean,
yeah, that's been great.
From Zoom. And I think that's really important now, you know, as you're thinking about teaching. And, you know, I was also reflecting before coming on here, when I was teaching, we didn't have metal detectors in schools, right? Kids couldn't bring guns to schools. Like, it's a weird, there's been a lot of, you know, really interesting changes that have happened over the last 2 decades. And I think teachers have a lot on their shoulders.
Yeah, I think you're right. And what kind of tends to happen, in my opinion, with the conversation, because I'm on social media a lot, particularly on Twitter, kind of, because that's the best way for me to get a sense of what is the conversation that is out there around COVID and teaching. And one of the things I'm noticing is that certain people will bring up, you know, child health in particular, specialists will bring up the impact of the mental health. And then there's this reaction from people who, oh, but we needed to have the lockdown, but we needed to have it, you know, they kind of brush aside that concern. And I think, you know, the child health practitioners are going, we know, well, this is my feeling, is that, yes, of course, no one's debating the need for these, you know, the need for the extreme measures that we've had to have. Everyone, of course, our physical health is really important.
Right.
By brushing aside the mental health impact, we are just setting ourselves up for another pandemic, in my opinion.
Yeah, it minimizes it, and kids a safe space where they can discuss it. And, you know, there was this joke that we have in psychiatry. It's like the redheaded stepchild of the medical profession, right? Nobody wants to go see the psychiatrist or the psychologist. They'll see all of the other doctors. But, you know, because there is a stigma associated with mental health issues, and there should not be. And maybe one of the beauties of this pandemic is we're going to destigmatize mental health, and it's okay to go to your teacher, because I actually think a student-teacher relationship is very special, and you might be that person that they're going to come to and say, I need help. Do you feel sometimes we just need a place to process information? So I know some schools are actually having, you know, like a day where they go to the auditorium, they see a movie on anxiety, they have a conversation about it, and knowing that it's safe to tell a friend, hey, I'm feeling anxious, because again, it's going to affect performance in class.
Yes.
Untreated anxiety, you know, those students aren't going to be at their best, you know, performing academically. And there's all that pressure as well. So now you've got kids who are having to learn how to handle anxiety, depression, ADD, being unable to focus, their brain's foggy. Maybe they've lost family members, right? They've had COVID, and they're going through COVID long hauler. Their parents have, and their parents aren't present for them. There's so many layers to this. So again, I think that's why I love bringing this conversation about brain health into this space, because brain health is actually a safer word than mental health. Taking care of your brain health is the way to revolutionize and change and improve your mental health. So by starting the day with the water or the green juice or a smoothie with protein powder, that's going to help you with focus. All of those things, or having a piece of Ezekiel bread or an avocado toast, or you know, sharing really wonderful tips that'll help support your brain health, or bringing, you know, almonds, banana with some water as snacks, like reinforcing that, it's going to help.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I've got so many ideas. I've got an idea for another project now.
Things, if I was in a school system and I was advising, people on how I would help, I call it moving the needle towards a direction of positive, empowered change. I think it's helpful. And again, no kid is thinking about their food and how it's impacting their academic performance. You were talking about, and I called it the cheerleader diet. You can run and get a Diet Coke and the vending machine and get the spike of sugar and be temporarily focused, but that's not going to get you through your homework.
No, and that availability is really important. I noticed that coming out of my diet, is that how frustrated I would get that I couldn't really rely on quick healthy snacks anymore, because they just weren't available. So I just have to pack everything, really. And then if I don't,
you have to plan. Well, it's like the easiest snacks to pack are like fruit. It's like go for I call it the low-hanging fruit. Literally, it's like just chop up a bunch of fruit and put it in a little container and bring it with you. Find the things that you love. It's easier for me to say, I've been in this field for a really long time, but if I reflect on all of the amazing things I've learned and the transformations that I have seen in the clinical setting with people's weight, no different than you, I've helped people lose hundreds of pounds through the very simple strategies and things everybody could do. It's like, the things I talk about in the book are things any student could do.
Yes. Yeah.
It's actually not hard, but there's lots of layers to it, and it's commitment. And I think we're so bogged down with so many things going on. You've talked about it. You're raising 3 kids, right? You've got 2 high-powered positions, plus your drama, doing your theater group.
That's the only thing I've had to pause at the moment. It's too much. But I'll pick that one up again.
Everybody's juggling so many things, and it's usually we end up being last on our priority list. We become last. The foods we eat, we don't think about it. We just eat and run. We got to take care of the kids. We get the lesson plans done. We've got our online teaching, so there's just no time. But we have to reverse that thinking, because now you taking care of yourself and showing up as your best self, people will feel it and they will know it. And they're going to ask you what you do.
Yes.
Like, you look so good. You're so happy. What's your secret?
Yeah. So going into the classroom then, what's going to be most important for teachers? Because from what you're saying, it seems to me that it's really important that they stay with relationship, with connectivity. That's actually going to be better for their brain health than necessarily worrying about catching up on literacy and maths.
Well, I think the connection piece is really important, because you as a teacher will inspire your kids to want to do well. I remember taking AP physics and AP chemistry, and I didn't even think I could do it. I was really overwhelmed. I had such wonderful teachers who literally walked me through the steps. I actually had to get a tutor. I took I remember in high school, and I was really struggling, but then I just hired a math teacher. Then I went off to college, and it was so easy, right? I was ahead of the game. But the teachers are the ones that inspire kids to do well. So I actually think that's one of the secrets to being a great educator, is inspiring your kids to want to learn the subject that you're learning. And if you're passionate about teaching, it'll just happen naturally. And knowing that they can come to you and ask questions. The ones that always do well are the ones that are inquisitive. They're the ones raising their hands. There's the ones sort of in their minds. But I love, you actually talked about this in a podcast, we can't forget about the quiet ones who might want to speak up. And I think as teachers, you might have a classroom of 40 or 70 or 100. I mean, if you're teaching at the university level, you've got hundreds of students. Because I remember when I was a TA, I had 3 classes of 40. And that's a lot of classes, and then you have your office hours, and then everybody wants A's, and you're trying to juggle your time and help everyone. But I remember what I would do with teaching is I I like to make it fun. It's like when you can go up there and be fun and passionate about, and hey, trying to make physiological science fun. Well, it was fun because everybody wanted to go off to medical school, so they were really focused. They wanted that A. They wanted that A. So, but I think the secret sauce to teaching is really relationships, because you're there, you already know the knowledge. You have to make it accessible in a way that they can retain it. I mean, again, now coming from the brain health field, tricks and tips to help kids remember things, it's always repetition. We know the more that you repeat things and the different ways that you learn. And so I am a big proponent of people taking notes by hand.
Yes.
There is something about listening to information and then writing it on paper. Your brain has to organize it in a very unique way. And so it's an interesting, I don't want to say this, information processing that gets learned. So that's why I say recording lectures, I think, is good for students. I like to actually be present and just listen. You can record, take notes of the recording. All of those skills will help you not only with memory retention, but you'll do better in school. And it would be interesting if teachers gave little tips like that.
Yes.
If you're struggling, here's what's been shown scientifically to help enhance your memory, right? Tape a lecture and take the notes. I actually love while I listen. And I will share with you, I was back at UCLA listening to there was a neurology symposium on Parkinson's, and that was my area of expertise. And, they had two speakers come up, and one of the speakers was one of my former professors. And, when you're speaking to an auditorium, you can see everyone. And he saw that I was there writing notes the whole time. I had a little book. I always bring my little notebook. Came up afterwards and he said, I saw you were taking notes. You already know all of this. And I said, yeah, but I like doing it. There were still new things that you taught. And I still have those notebooks. And for me to continue to keep my mind sharp, even in topics that I'm, well versed in. And so that just goes to show we're never too old to take and keep learning. And I think there's something to taking notes by hand versus computer, right? A lot of kids are now bringing computers into the classroom, take notes or taking notes on their phone. But doing it by hand.
Yes, right.
Again, to organize, it's almost like organizing it in your frontal lobes and it to retain and recall.
But as you said as well, it's more than you talked about doing it in different ways, so in creative ways as well. So they can't just kind of rote learn, right? It's got to be, they've got to know the application of the knowledge as well, and that's when all those different creative strategies can come in.
Yeah, the practical application is always the best, knowing that whatever you're learning, if you can tie it to something that's practical and tangible, you're going to retain it, because we learn that way. We learn through stories, right? You always recall better through stories. So I think really smart teachers use storylines and narratives to help information sticky. Not as easy to do if you're teaching organic chemistry.
I'll take your word for it.
Creative teachers can do that. And that's the beauty of teaching. It's like stretching your mind to make this information really cool and creative. So, you might have to teach from a certain textbook, but like you said, keep learning, or throw a new research study in there, throw some beautiful pictures up. We're sensory beings, and we do really well with sensory experiences, which is why, again, I like that gentleman you had on where the classroom, you could put the sticky notes up around. And he's like, I don't understand why they didn't remember the sticky notes. like he went, for those of you can watch the podcast,
Yeah,
but
with Michael Casis is one of the early ones. He was great, an educational psychologist.
he came back and nobody remembered
Yeah.
what was on the sticky notes that were around the room, but they remember they had a lot of fun. And so like, darn, I thought this would be really cool. This new interactive learning environment.
Yeah. But that would be good for their brain health, right? Because we talked, that was one of the great things I loved, when we stopped recording, was we talked about collaboration and how those relationships that we have with others are really important for our brain health too, right? And for connecting neurons, is that the right?
Social connections are helpful. That's why I think even studying in groups is really helpful. We thrive in social environments, we used to all go to the library in groups. Then I'd fall asleep in the library. You got to take your nap, and that's when the real learning happened after. Come on, you had all your good learning strategies too.
Yeah, I'm a note taker too, actually. I get a lot from notes.
I mean, I'm sure people do that, but people always ask me, how do you retain memories? I mean, there's really cool ways that you can take information that you've learned and store it in your memory. But that's probably for another.
Yeah, for next podcast.
Because you could literally you do it by taking the things that are around the room. There's different pictures around it, and you can every time you look at a picture, you like put a word to it, or we say this with like a grocery list. If you wanted to remember 10 items on your grocery list, you would each item, like banana is with that endless summer picture, grapes are with that lamp, avocados are with the pillow, and you start to visualize in your mind, with
what the picture is. Do we do that unintentionally as well? Because I read some research that around exams, and we have a test here in Australia called the NAPLAN test. And one of the things they were saying is that, students learn everything. It's a literacy and numeracy test. They learn everything in the classroom, but then you take them out of that classroom to do the test. You're actually affecting their memory recall, because there is something in the room where you learnt something that helps you recall the
because you're sort of on a subconscious level, that's the environment within which all of that information was taken. So they've associated that environment with the information. So that is true. Yeah. And then you take somebody out. If you take somebody out of that environment, then the people that did the note taking and really worked on just the recall piece of information. I think, learning how to learn is a really important skill set. I feel like, again, note taking and retention, and one of the great strategies is just say it into your phone and then listen.
Yes.
If there's something really important that you want to learn. So from a drama perspective, I mean, how do students memorize monologues?
Yeah.
How do you retain Hamlet and Shakespeare and unique languages? Well, you record it, you put it in your phone, listen to it. And I've taught people, listen to it just before you go to sleep.
Yes.
It'll help set it in your mind before you go to sleep, then listen when you wake up. There's all these really fun ways to retain knowledge.
And for me, like I that's how I memorize scripts. But the other thing I do is you move while you speak as well. So you can kind of, in the pattern of the moving, you also retain knowledge as well.
Have you found that to be successful for you? That's how you memorize? Wow. I like that.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, some people need that. Actually, I found some people need to move to communicate well.
Yeah.
They're not good communicating while sitting still. It might make them anxious. So some people, I'm sure there's some teachers that like to sort of pace and move about the class because that forward movement. I mean, it's every time you move and walk, you're, firing, neurons are firing in your brain. So it's all, that's why I love movement as a really smart strategy to maintaining your brain health as well. Because, hey, you're moving, you're keeping your blood flowing to the 100 miles of blood vessels you have in your brain.
That's how I wrote my PhD, actually. I was like walking around the room speaking my ideas, and then I'd rush back to the computer to type it all down. Yeah.
I love that idea. That's
yeah. I don't know. I just did naturally did it. I didn't know that's what I see. It was brain health back then.
You were already doing it. Yeah. It's like the power walk. It's like taking the power walk to a new level. It's an idea, you know, being in our creative space. I mean, you're already extremely, well, we all are creative, number one. I mean, everybody is a creator, but you've really expanded the way your mind takes in information. And movement is just one of the best ways. Movement is one of the best ways to get out of being stuck, anxious thought. It requires breath. It requires getting your heart rate up, and it starts to get those endorphins flowing. Releases GABA that helps to calm you. So that's just another great tip. If you're feeling stuck, you're ruminating things, get up and move.
Yeah, and that would be a good advice, I think, for young kids coming out of COVID, is to not worry too much if they're moving around, because I know, like looking at my children, they started off the lockdown quite active, and then as it's gone on, they've become more and more sedentary and getting bored.
Kind of scary, right?
It is.
So they're in this confined environment, and one of the things you said on a previous podcast I think is really important. Learning should be fun, and kids like to get out and play. They need to like be outdoors, be moving. It's part of what makes them creative. And we need to keep that going, because we know during lockdown, you know, the World Health Organization is so concerned about people's sedentary behavior. They literally changed the physical activity guidelines. It used to be they wanted people to move 150 minutes a week. They 300 minutes a week.
You're kidding.
Oh, because there was such a change in you know, an increase in sedentary behavior because of the lockdown, and that has detrimental effects to your brain health, really, because you're not keeping the blood flowing.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the best ways to keep the blood flowing to your brain and your body is movement. So it's an asset. So we want to keep the kids out, keep them out there running around. If you have to get out there and do drama class with your kids,
call me. But I think you're right. You know, drama, sport, all those creative kind of
get a basketball net, have them outside, like shooting hoops or doing.
And you too, teachers, don't just stand there and watch. You've got to be involved as well. You've had your
go get your bike, get on your bike, right? Get the hoop out, get a tennis racket, and hit the ball against a brick wall. Just fun. You know, this is where we have to creatively move.
Yes.
That's, again, it's the idea generation, and it keeps people from getting sluggish and sad. That's the biggest thing. You know, a lot of people are sad and depressed, and you know, that's what I started realizing the students are struggling with, and they don't understand why they're sad. It's like, well, you haven't been able to be social and have, you know, what we would call a normal college life or high school life. We're now finally getting back again to the football games and, you know, the things that make school fun. I think the important, you know, there's the learning piece, and then there's the social piece and that growth, right? We're growing as human beings. It's not just acquiring knowledge. It's
And I've seen like a lot of parents and news articles too concerned about the long-term impacts on mental health for young people and adults as well because of the continued lockdown. But you talk about neuroplasticity and so is there, how much do we have to worry about that, or can we reverse the damage, I guess is what I want.
I am a very empowering person, and I would say we can absolutely reverse this. So trauma, post-traumatic stress, and post-traumatic stress disorder is a part of, it's a part of being a human being on planet Earth. We have wars, we have hurricanes and floods and earthquakes and pandemics. And one of the beautiful things about being humans is that we're resilient in spirit, in mind, body, and spirit. And do I think there's going to be a very long mental health tail to this? I do. but I do want to empower people that we can improve mental health outcomes. We can get people the health they need, the help they need. One thing we have to think about, and again, it's because I come from a background of psychiatry, that, you know, certain people are going to have mental health issues that are in the family lineage. So there's an ancestral history of anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, and kind of pandemics can really exacerbate symptoms and bring these out in kids when, you know, maybe you wouldn't see it till later on down the line when they can actually cope with it. So now we're learning to have to address the elephant in the room and teach coping strategies. I'm heartened because I've seen, you know, we've been able to help veterans and police officers and firefighters who deal with trauma, and all of those techniques that we have that have worked successfully in those populations can be used currently. We're just now, as a global community, having to embrace more of those. And during the pandemic, we've seen our biggest celebrities step up. We saw LeBron James did commercials for Calm, and now getting a meditation app and doing it is cool. You know, young boys are going to do that, which I love. And we have Michael Phelps, you know, who did commercials. I don't know if you're getting those in Australia, but
no, I'm going to look them up though.
Yeah, and Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer.
Wow.
So James is our NBA star.
Oh yeah,
here.
I have a basketball family
basketball.
here, so we're all over the basketballs.
And then Michael Phelps is an Olympic, just one of the most decorated Olympic swimmers here in the United States, and he's done commercials for telehealth and, you know, connecting with psychologists through Zoom. And I think that's really exciting and empowering. It doesn't make all of this so scary. And before the pandemic, you know, meditation, doing those kind of things, you know, it was for some of us, those of us who are already in the field who understand the importance of mindfulness meditation, but now it just brought it to, you know, sort of a national or global problem, and it's making it acceptable. So in answer to your question, do I think we can get through this? I do. It's just going to take a full-scale effort from teachers and educators, parents, to get kids the resources they need.
Yeah, and an acknowledgement that it is an issue, and once we acknowledge it, then we can do something about it.
And that it's okay to be sad, and that it's okay to feel these feelings. We have to allow people their feelings in a safe space to get through it, and then showing them healthy ways, helping coping skills to get through these things. Because I've seen really incredible transformations happen in the psychiatric setting, you know, improvements in quality of life. That's our number one goal. You know, having patients come into our setting, our whole goal is, can we improve your quality of life, no matter what issue you have? And that is an absolute yes. So
amazing.
I'm heartened. I feel like we can get through this. Yes, it's going to be challenging. And yes, you know, another one of these may come down the line, or there may be more variants, but we're resilient. We're getting through it. We've got vaccines, we've got medications coming out, and I think that's the part we also have to celebrate is we can do this.
Yes, yeah. And we're in a much better position than we were, you know, when the pandemic first started. As you say, we've been through it before, plus we have medicines and my gosh, Dr. K, I still have so many questions. We have to have another one.
Okay.
I'll invent another podcast, or we just come back on Teaching Heroes.
No. We'll just keep doing this. I mean, you know, I love talking to you.
I love you too.
And I love your enthusiasm and your kindness and just beautiful person that you are in the world. So keep sparkling and shining and just, you know, making other people's lives better, because you do that with the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Your support is just incredible to me. So thank you so much. Thank you. And this has been another episode of Teaching Heroes, and we'll see you all next week. Bye.